How do you contain a chip that's cheap enough for hobbyists yet already sits inside 4 families of Russian weapons? On July 6th, one of those chips helped a drone choose its own target and kill 3 people. Export controls only count scarce data center hardware, but this weapon used an ordinary mass-market board. So what does this actually mean? Cheap intelligence crosses borders faster than any rule can stop it, so today's rules must govern the action itself. That's today's lead. Also in today's episode, banks are preparing for quantum decryption, researchers are testing whether AI can fit gene editing into one carrier, and Britain is turning battlefield surveillance toward protesters. Come with me, let's get into it. At a gas station in Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine, were 19-year-old Tetiana Bubinets, 41-year-old Oleksiy Safeheron, and 48-year-old Roman Karpy. On July 6th, a Russian Molniya strike drone killed all 3 of them. No human operator confirmed the target. So how did an AI weapon end up making that choice on its own? Ukrainian analysts later recovered the wreckage. An unencrypted module still held the drone's classifier logic, the instructions that it used to recognize a target. The system had been trained to look for propane tanks. Investigators believe the drone found the tanks at a gas station, picked the site, and detonated. Katerina Bondar of the Center for Strategic and International Studies confirmed that distinction. A CSIS expert said that this looks like the first documented case where a Russian self-targeting drone killed civilians with no human making the final call. Now, autonomous weapons had already made lethal choices before this. Ukraine reportedly tested drones told to attack anything they detected inside a set area. A figure in Ukraine's drone industry said that Russian soldiers died in that same incident, and we covered that on June 13th. What changed here was who died and who decided. A Russian weapon killed civilians after the machine, not a person, made the final call. The computer behind it was surprisingly ordinary. An Nvidia Jetson Orin is a small board built for robotics hobbyists and factory cameras. It can classify images right on the device without calling a data center. Advanced chip export controls simply don't cover it. That same board has now turned up in 4 families of Russian weapons. Nvidia says it does not sell to Russia. That report may describe Nvidia's own sales, but it misses the wider problem. A part costing just a few $100s can move freely through ordinary resale markets. And even on the expensive end, the export system still fails to stop leaks. That same week, Taiwanese prosecutors indicted 9 people, including a senior Nvidia manager and 2 Supermicro employees. Prosecutors allege the group used forged documents to route 130 restricted B300 AI servers toward China. 74 got through, while officials stopped 56. In a separate U.S. case, prosecutors allege that a Southeast Asian intermediary bought roughly $2.5 billion in servers in 2024 and 2025 as part of a scheme that diverted servers to China. After examining the recovered drone board, Colonel Serhiy Minayev said, "In a few years, we will be living in a Terminator movie." Now, the immediate danger is the lethal decision, but a deeper governance failure lies behind it. A system built to track scarce, expensive accelerators cannot stop a mass-market board sold through ordinary electronics stores. Now, enforcing export rules does change what happens. Taiwan did stop 56 restricted servers, but those barriers only delay the top tier. They don't stop it. Out at the edge, everyone already assumes compute is cheap. Now, durable rules have to say what autonomous systems may do, who stays responsible, and how we can check that responsibility afterward. A border can slow down a server rack, but a border cannot supply the moral judgment that a weapon is missing. All right, the drone story shows us defenses built for yesterday's threat. Every bank customer faces a similar problem. Someone could steal encrypted records today and open them years from now. So how do you replace the locks across global finance before quantum computers break the old ones? Post-quantum cryptography is encryption built to resist that future machine. Banks now have to migrate payment rails, digital identities, security chips, and records that must stay private for decades. A 2025 survey found that 91% of cybersecurity professionals in the US and Europe lacked a formal post-quantum roadmap. The Bank for International Settlements has warned that banks need a phased rewrite, not just a quick swap. And the target keeps moving too. AI-assisted cryptanalysis has already made HAWK 512 easier to crack, cutting its estimated security from 150 bits to 108 bits. But that attack still isn't necessarily practical. So think of all this as replacing every lock in a city while people still need to get into their homes. The old keys keep working during the switch so that attackers can copy encrypted data now and then simply unlock it later. On August 24th, three groups all moved on the replacement at once. The U.S. Treasury and the Bank of England co-chair the G7 Cyber Expert Group, and it just published a quantum readiness roadmap for the financial sector. A hardware standards group published benchmarks that show which security chips are ready for post-quantum protection today and which chips can only be upgraded later. Buyers can now test the label instead of just trusting the marketing. Safeheron also launched a live pilot of ML-DSA-65, which is a standardized signature system that proves who sent a transaction and whether anyone altered it. The pilot will test wallet creation and on-chain transfers on the near testnet. Regulators from Malta, Bhutan, and other countries are watching. They plan to release its code as open source. And one participant put the standard the right way. Cryptography protecting institutional assets should stand up to independent scrutiny, not ask for trust. Now, your bank account relies on math you never see. When security works, you stop noticing it in daily life. You tap, you transfer, you sign without ever thinking about the proof behind it. But that invisibility only comes if they earn it. A government task force can't earn that trust alone, and neither can a hardware label. Public benchmarks, live trials, and open code let outsiders actually test the claims. Banks are building quantum defenses before the full threat arrives, but attackers could still exploit their assumptions. That is how a protective standard should spread. People check it for themselves over and over until it's ordinary enough that nobody has to announce it. All right, those bank defenses must fit hardware already in service. Gene editing faces an even tighter fit. An editor that's too large may need two carriers just to reach a cell. Can AI design a gene editor that's both compact and effective? Protein engineering usually means scientists build huge libraries of altered molecules, test them one by one, and learn from the few that actually work. Doing that takes equipment, time, and enough money to survive thousands of failed attempts. Here, the starting enzyme was FANZOR2. It's an RNA-guided DNA cutter with fewer than 500 amino acids, which is small enough to fit in a single delivery vehicle. Its small size was promising, but its editing strength still needed work. So writing in Nature Biotechnology, a team built EvoMax. One model reads protein sequences the way that a language model reads text. A second model works backward from a protein's three-dimensional shape. A final step learns from just a handful of measured variants. So think of it as sending scouts out into a vast mountain range. Instead of testing every possible molecule, the system focuses on the most promising options and learns from each attempt. EvoMax's proposed variants worked 84% of the time. Competing model-guided approaches only hit 20 or 35%. The winning editor, FANZMax V3 HLA, hit 97% editing at its best human target. It beat earlier compact editors by more than 2.5 times over. The team then used one AAV carrier to edit the human PCSK9 gene, which regulates cholesterol, in mice carrying a humanized version of that gene. Now, this is still just a mouse result. Human use, of course, is years of safety work away. So the bigger challenge is who can now afford to search for new biological possibilities. When 4 out of 5 proposed designs work, a lab wastes less effort building dead ends. So the lab's limited testing capacity can go toward candidates with a real shot at success. Now, that still doesn't remove the need for animal studies or safety checks or human trials, but it changes which candidates reach testing and how fast they get there. Proposing a working molecule is getting almost as cheap as testing one. That lets smaller teams work on more diseases and try more ideas that the old, expensive trial and error process used to block. All right, that gene editor shows what can happen when AI learns which signals are most important. In Britain, a model trained on war may soon classify protesters. So what exactly is crossing over from Ukraine's battlefield into everyday life? On August 24th, the UK became the first international partner to get access to Ukraine's Avengers AI labs. The wartime program gathered roughly 5 million images from thousands of frontline cameras and infrared sensors. The first British pilot will run at a defense site. Buried fiber optic cables will sense movement and vibration, so the ground itself becomes a long tripwire. An AI model will use that signal to spot intruders and hostile actors. The strongest case for the program rests on its battlefield history. Ukraine built these systems to beat an adversary actively trying to fool them. A peacetime lab struggles to recreate that same pressure. Professor Stephen Murdoch of University College London doubts that the Ukrainian data will meaningfully improve sensing methods that have existed for decades. The Ministry of Defense already confirmed something bigger. The pilot will also detect protesters. Officials named airports, prisons, railways, and energy plants as possible next sites. Officials will also share the data with private companies. So what Britain is importing is more than a sensor. It's importing a whole threat model. Officials are repurposing a classifier built for soldiers and civilians so it now targets protesters and passers-by. So now they treat ordinary civic protest as a hostile actor. If this system flags you outside an energy plant, you have no way to see its model. You can't see the images that trained it, learn why it flagged you, or use that same network to watch whoever is watching you. They can see you, but you can never see them. Policymakers created this imbalance through choices about ownership, access, and secrecy. The fiber optic cable itself doesn't require any of that secrecy. Britain could instead open its sensing systems to public inspection and challenge. They chose a pilot where the state and companies can watch, but the people being watched cannot see back. Sharing more knowledge can make things safer for everyone. When someone concentrates that knowledge, the same capability becomes control. Britain chose to point its cameras this way, but it can choose to point them somewhere else. All right, let's bring it to a close today. Sometimes officials can stop a chip right at the loading dock. Taiwan stopped 56 restricted servers, but today's top story shows where that strategy runs out. A board that costs a few $100s reached a Russian weapon through ordinary commerce. 3 people died after the machine picked the target. This capability is spreading at both ends now. High-end servers move on forged paperwork, while cheap edge computers just get bought in shops and resold. The assumption that computing power stays scarce no longer holds. The other stories today point to what could take its place. Banks are now building post-quantum protection using public benchmarks, live tests, and code meant for open release. That system asks people to check the defense themselves. Researchers are now using AI-guided evolution to search more of biology. EvoMax turned sparse measurements into working gene editor designs, succeeding 4 times out of 5. Humans still face years of testing, but many more candidates can now reach that stage. Britain, though, moved the opposite way. Britain took a model trained on 5 million battlefield images and pointed it at protesters at home. The people it watches get no matching view into the system. A chip alone won't decide whether this spreading capability becomes public protection, medical progress, autonomous violence, or concentrated surveillance. Institutions and people are the ones making that choice. Intelligence is now becoming a normal part of everyday systems. We now have a chance to make the rules around action just as open, shared, and checkable as the capability itself. See you tomorrow.